Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6th night of the Orphan's Tales live reading series, live from Peaks Island, from Maine, from a very, very windy night here in Maine. Absolutely howling outside. You might even hear it at one point. It's just very spooky and New Englandy and all of those things outside. It's kind of a sad day here in Maine. We had some bad milestones. It was a really big jump in COVID cases here today. Bigger jump than we've had. And all but one county now has cases. Now, you may not know much about Maine, but a lot of it is very rural, and most of the cases, the vast majority, are down south where we are. But up where there are little more than trees, moose, and 3 guys named Dave, there are now cases, except for one county that I actually am not even entirely sure how to pronounce. Sorry about the lighting there. Someone was messing with it, so we have to fix it again. I think that's more normal. Yeah, so just the one right in the middle is the only part of the state left that doesn't have active COVID cases. So it's kind of a sad day for our state. But life must go on, the show must go on, we all must go on as best we can. So I've been kind of down today. I know some of you have probably been down too. So let's try to get up together a little bit. Once again, the beautiful music that we're listening to is from the album For the Girl in the Garden, which is based on the book I'm about to read for you. And it's by S.J. Tucker. You can find her at sjtucker.com and on Bandcamp under the same name. Yeah, she's done 4 albums based on my work. She's a wonderful person, wonderful songwriter who you should absolutely give a listen to. To get the housekeeping out of the way, I am not doing an audiobook, as I do not have the rights to do so. I am doing a play. You're watching a play. You can find me elsewhere on the internet at Patreon at Cat Valenti, as well as Twitter at Cat Valenti. Facebook as well, but who Facebooks anymore? There is a tip jar in my user profile here on Instagram and one on my website at catherinemvalenti.com. You're absolutely not obligated. These are all free readings. But if you would like to throw something in the hat, we'd really appreciate it. Times are tough and tight around here. I know they are for you as well. So anything or nothing are very deeply appreciated. I definitely want to thank Sean, Heather B, and Heather H for their tips last night. And it was lovely and wonderful. And you are absolutely my heroes for helping us out. We almost have enough to pay our electric bill, which if any of you who do know Maine know that Satan himself runs our electric company. So yeah, I was thinking about things I could tell you about the Orphan's Tales tonight, and all those long ago days when I wrote it, 18 years ago. And I remembered that the goose stuff is all has a very specific provenance, inspiration, which is a book called The Satyricon. Any classicists among you may have heard of it, may know about it. It is a very salacious, very raunchy, picaresque adventure story written in ancient Rome, set in ancient Rome. And at one point, our hero, he encounters a witch's hut. She's not called a witch, but she is a witch. Her name's Anathea, which means wine goddess, which hashtag relatable. She has a flock of geese and he kills one, and his punishment in the Satyricon is to have his ability to get an erection taken away. And the entire rest of the book is fueled by him trying to get his virility back while the god Priapus chases after him, causing problems. Obviously, we have some different priorities in the Orphan's Tales, but setting all the action off by killing a sacred goose. The geese were sacred to Cupid or Eros, the god of doing it. So hence it was an appropriate punishment in the book. I won't spoil or shock any younger people watching by telling you how he solves that particular problem, but it's pretty graphic. And I love the Satyricon. It's really a wonderful text to read while you're learning Latin, because a lot of our knowledge of Roman food comes from it. There's a huge banquet scene in the beginning. So a lot of our knowledge of Roman food and social customs comes from this book. And it's very funny and irreverent, and I mean, obviously I just told you the plot, it's pretty irreverent, and feels very modern in a way, despite you know, the plot revolving around witches and geese. So that was definitely the inspiration for my witch and my geese. But Leander's fate is other than our friend from the Satyricon. Okay, let's get started tonight. Ooh, holding the book upside down, an excellent start for anyone. I'm happy to take questions afterwards, but it does tend to move fairly quickly, so think of questions while I'm reading if you want to ask any, so that I don't sit here awkwardly on camera asking for questions while no one says anything. It's a terrible moment for everyone. All right, back to the garden. Grandmother's tale continued. From the long, unmoving shadows beyond the last of the 7 bodies, my silent guide made a small, rustling sound with her beautiful tail. We brought them back here, from the fields of poppies and old sodden wheat. They weighed nothing at all, like carrying moths. We kept them here where my dark brother and my pale sister and some few others came to hide ourselves. What else was there to do? There are no graveyards for us, no rites, no songs, no fires. We had their shells in our hands, and we did not know what to do. We just didn't know. Violfer knows the faceted face of the one buried in diamonds. Her voice was a whisper thick as wet wool. The new stars up there, the stars that flare up when we die, they're just markers. It's not them. This isn't them. We don't know where they are. You look up into the sky, little girl. It's a mausoleum. And those new bright lights are tombs. But they are not there. But they are not here either. The wolf star fixed me with her yellow eyes. I padded quietly across the room and sat down heavily before the jewel girl, pale and dead. I was not sure what was expected of me. It was very warm, the light rubbing against my hindquarters and nuzzling my fur lazily. The glassy wound at the diamond woman's throat seemed to grow in my vision, like a second mouth grinning horribly below the first. I nosed at it, and it was neither warm nor cold, but hard, nothing like flesh. Beneath my silver fur, the wound the mare had made throbbed, and the smaller cut from the fox just below it stung like the quick needle of a wasp. The Ulfer simply watched me, offering no help at all. This, then, was my test. I got to my paws and half climbed over the poor girl, half kneeled on her slippery drift of gems. I put my muzzle to my chest and gnawed open the space between the wounds so that the scabs broke and they flowed freely into each other, one long, deep gash, a hole chewed in flesh, the first bite of the world. The blood came dark and ugly at first, and I was dizzy, and so hot in that close, dark room. And it splashed on the empty corpse like ink spilled over a mirror. But after a long while, it began to flow clear, and then filled with a gentle light, soft and sweet-smelling as sugared pears in a copper dish, cold, so cold, and the color of the moon. Half faint, I wearily pressed my bleeding breast hard against the woman's cut throat. I thought she really did. I thought that all in a rush she would gasp and cry out. Her back would arch like a drawn bow. Her eyes would suddenly open. She would cough. She would draw ragged breaths, and all those diamonds would clatter to the floor as she finally bolted upright, face beaming, bright as morning. She did not move. The light trickled out of me and into her, and I watched it foam at the bottom of her back like a cup of water tossed into a deep bathtub. The shadows draped the room, and the blood which was light slowed and stopped. Gently, with all the weight of breath, the dead woman on the bier closed her fingers over my paw. That was all. She did not open her eyes or sit up and ask for water. 4 fingers just lifted and fell again, closing me in a grip which stone might envy. The wolf star leaned over us. We always hope. It would be an answer, anyway, but they never wake up. I suppose after all this time it would be strange if they did. The elfer closed her eyes and began to wash me, to clean my wound in the wolfish way, with her long tongue, rough as marsh sand. With each stroke my body pulsed, vibrating under her like a plucked harp. I could see only her golden fur shimmering candle-wise, though I could feel the stone star's fingers on my fur, cold and lifeless. She lapped up the light like milk, slurping at it, sucking from the gash in the manicarnica, carefully collecting every drop. Finally, she closed her long, silky snout over my shaggy breast, gripping my chest in her jaws and pinning me to the diamond girl, teeth pressing my ragged skin. I could feel it, rushing all through me like a burst wine barrel, the light and the blood that poured out of her jaws, finding its circuit in me, doubled back brighter and harsher and more terrible than before, searching out a wave to ride into my bones and belly, great rolling tides that filled me up like a water horn. I was glutted with it, light from the wolf's mouth and the jewel's body and mine, light old and unspeakable as the sky. I choked, I moaned, even screamed emptily into the cavern as they pushed it through me, for this is work, granddaughter. The change of light. It is pushing a boulder up a mountain or a mountain up a mountain. She opened and filled and sewed and opened me again. And how many hours I lay helpless and quivering between them I cannot say. They took the dim, whittled light I had in me and returned it to me blazing like nothing I had ever known. When finally I felt the wolf's jaw release me, I started as if out of a dream, every pore thrumming open, shaking. I was a woman again. I could feel it. 5 fingers on each hand. Teeth flat and thick. Long hair grazing my waist like a paintbrush. The elfer touched my face with her wet nose. What we have given you is yours, but it does not belong to you. We don't mind it. We've never minded. But light is a thing with limits. You must understand that. When a star gives it, she is diminished. She shut her eyes against my cheek. I have been here for you and your mothers for a long time. I am the source you come to. I am the well from which you drink. For the first time, the star seemed to me less bright than the cave walls. She was just an old wolf, her fur bare in patches, her eyes milky and misted, her muzzle going gray. But then she smiled, as much as a wolf can smile, and I was once more surrounded by her light and warmth, which was it? I couldn't tell. Only a little less than it had been before. You changed when you entered the cave. We did it for you then. It is a great magic, almost. And here she paused, stealing a glance at the woman with the colorless curls. The greatest of all. Metamorphosis is the most profound of all acts. When your light comes from our hands and not from your grandparents and their grandparents, back and back and back to that poor girl in her tent clutching a baby to her breast, you can be like us, at least a little like us. And it is only a simple thing to change the outline of a whole. The wolf star swallowed hard. After all, a hole is nothing but space. After a silence deeper than a dungeon, she stood back, straight-spined, and stared down at me, speaking carefully through her silky muzzle. But you are not one of us. For you, this thing is irreversible except by death, and not only the flesh is altered. Only the strongest of you can resist the collapse of the soul into the form. The mind is lazy. It naturally imitates the body. I have known none of you yet who can remain human when they wear another skin. But the thing is yours to do, if you should wish to do it. The cold, clear hand of the jewel girl released mine, and it had all the life of a scrap of paper blowing across an empty street. Without a word, the old gold-pelted wolf led me back through 2 doors and into the great open arena of the first cavern. It seemed a century ago I had bent under the mare's teeth there, and she had made her hole in me. Go, Star Daughter. There is much work for you to do. I knew I should not, but I could not keep myself from it. I knelt and put my arms around her great shaggy neck, burying my face in the smell of her, of cedar and wet rock, of snow just fallen. You never know, I whispered. Maybe the new stars aren't just markers. Maybe they are the Mana Karnika. Maybe they went home. The elfer shook her head against my skin, and the fur was like the crackle of heat lightning. Her voice was tiny and soft. No one goes home. A hole is nothing but space. We are accidents, and there is no grace for us. She pulled back and gave my cheek the briefest of licks. The wolf star padded quietly away from me, vanishing before she found the far wall. Stumbling out into the lightning world, my eyes stung by the first darts of sunlight, I sat heavily on the grass, exhaustion slamming into me like a stone wall. And the fox stood just a few feet from me, watching me with cold eyes. Some who deserve failure do not achieve it, he sniffed. Some who deserve nothing are given the world. So here it is, woman, the world. Go into it, but do not ever speak of what is past here. It is forbidden to all with tongues to utter it. We want to stay hidden. We have chosen this place, and power granted can be lost. Do not think you have seen the last of me, nor ever that you are now my equal. The Elfer is hopeless and old. A filled hole is not empty space, and we are all full, so full of light. You are a thief and a vampire. And if I had my way, you and your daughters would have no more of our blood. As the sun crept on Lion's feet over the green hills, it illuminated his fur, bristle by bristle, until he was so bright I could not look. And then he was gone, and the light shone through the place where he had been. Out of the garden. When midnight lay over the 2 children like a seraph's blue arm, the boy gingerly laid his head in the girl's lap, letting her voice cradle him. He pretended he did not hear her breath stop when he shifted, or the quaver in her voice like a single mislaid thread in a beaded gown. But as soon as his head touched the rough fabric of her dress, a terrible crunching sound was heard as strange feet trampled the earth outside their little thicket. The girl screamed, an awful, high-pitched sound like a crane shot through with a silver arrow. The boy leapt up, drawing his pathetic little dagger, determined to protect his secret prize. But as ghostly hands ripped apart the sweet-smelling briars, he recognized the danger was far worse than any witch or arcane spell. The boy saw, framed in jasmine boughs like a fiery mandala, the wrathful face of his sister, her eyes filling with accusations like a judge's scroll. "I've caught you now, you vile little rat," she crowed triumphantly. "You'll be punished, consorting with the demon girl." "She's not a demon," he blurted, not at all meaning to. Dinarzad was fearful as a lion in heat. The girl breathed quick and hoarse, unable to move. "She's not! You leave us alone!" Something of the wolf and the cave must have seeped into him like spilled ink, for he never before had had the courage to say such a thing to her. Dinarzade swooped into the thicket like a crazed harpy. The boy could almost imagine feathers puffing from her skin, and seized him by the hair, dragging him away from the now weeping girl, though he had kicked and cursed like a grown man. In his vision the girl retreated, a moon slipping behind cobalt-rimmed clouds. The light was draining from his world. All he could see was her eyes, huge and dark as forest owls, staring after him. When they reached the gates of the garden, the boy bit his sister savagely on her perfumed arm, and she stopped, slapping him hard across the face, so hard it split his lip like a pine branch. He spat blood onto the earth. You may think you're a man now, little brother, but men do not go near wicked devils like her. Do you want to bring her curse on the whole family? You spoiled little whelp. I'll whip you till morning. Defiant as a rooster crowing at sunset, the boy bellowed back. Yes, yes, I am a whelp. I am a wolf with teeth like pirate swords, and I'll tear you into as many pieces as there are jewels in the Sultan's vaults. She's not a demon, and I'm going back to her right now. He crossed his arms over his young chest and felt pride surging in him like the star's blood. But Dinarzade blazed. Her eyes grew dark as molded dungeons, and she gripped his arm, tightening slowly. No, little brother, you are not going anywhere. The boy woke in a foul, dark-smelling prison. Dinarzade held a child in each arm, twins bawling their identical hearts out. He was trapped with her in the royal nursery, amid the tortured cries of dozens of infants, more terrible than horned demons at their forges. Dinarzade, almost a woman grown and ready to be married out of the household, spent her evenings caring for the palace children, and she ruled them all with a fist stronger than any iron smelted by mortal man. She was a vengeful goddess, and her will was absolute. Tonight she was tending the youngest, and for his trespass the boy was tied to her skirts and this wretched room. It was worse, he was certain, than any old dungeon in a king's castle, and there was no hope of escape as long as his sister's eyes were fastened on him like a scorpion's pincers. But the gods are not always unkind to small boys, and fate was to intervene in the pink flesh of a colicky princeling. Not yet understanding its royal duty, the poor thing simply insisted on his mother's arms. Thus Dinarzade was compelled to deliver the squalling child to the appropriate bedroom. If you move so much as a toe from one flagstone to the next, she warned, I will lock you away until you rot. One brother will not be missed amid the dozens. And with that, she swept out the door, rose-colored silks trailing behind her. Of course, the boy had disappeared out the north window within 3 heartbeats. The bower looked as though a battle had been fought there, pitch tossed from battlements and soldiers in formation crushing all underfoot. The white blossoms were in tatters, hanging like peasants' rags on snapped boughs. Their supper had been strewn everywhere, and he saw that he had dented his water flask against a gnarled root when Dinarzade had snatched him away. The ruin of the flowers touched him the most, the oleander torn petal from petal, scattered on the dirt. The place where he had heard tales that still burned like lamp oil inside him was destroyed, ransacked like a fine house, and the girl was nowhere in sight. He searched over all the hiding places he knew in the vast garden, through the hedges and the rose trees, the lily ponds with their ululating bullfrogs, the olive groves and the borders of the fruit orchards. She was gone, disappeared, and all the stories with her. The boy sat down heavily on a rim of a bronze fountain whose water trickled gently into the night. He put his golden head in his hands, reproaching himself for lack of care. He had let himself be caught, found missing. He was an impossible thief and an even more hopeless protector. But then, he thought to himself, Prince Leander was also caught, so perhaps he could be forgiven. He looked up in his despair, and the moon floated through his sight like a great paper lantern. As the clouds passed over it, a single wild goose arced over its vast face, tracing a graceful path in the night. He heard it call, lonely and foreign, like a jade flute, and sighed deeply. Got another one of the lovely illustrations here of the goose flying overhead in the moon. The goose sounded again, this time very near him, and the boy realized it was no bird which called to him, but the dark-eyed girl who was hiding behind a slender young cedar not far away. His heart flew upward like a duck taking flight from a still pond, and he ran to her, stopping just short of clasping her in his young arms. She looked bashful and embarrassed, her black eyes downcast. "How did you learn to call like the wild water birds?" he asked eagerly. "I told you. I fed them and talked to them since I was a child. There was no one else. They sometimes spread their wings over me on winter nights when it's cold. We rest together under the hard stars." The boy again resisted the urge to embrace her, and instead clapped her on the shoulder as he had seen his father do with his comrades. "You told me, but how could I believe it? Someday you must teach me," he announced. "But first, the story. Continue the story. I must know what happened to the prince now the witch has finished her tale." The two stole away from the fountain, which was, after all, a poor hiding place. They ducked into a grove of sweet-scented cedars, and the girl settled in. She smiled up at him with a strange, feline grin. "You're wrong, though. The witch had hardly begun." The witch's tale continued. Grandmother folded her arms like an old stick-bug, smiling her thin smile and stroking my hair. I still remember her voice and how it wrapped around that dark cellar, clawing at the walls and licking into the massive locks at the same time that it softened my fear like a spinner wetting thread between her lips. "So you can change like that, even now, right now?" "Yes, I could." "Could I do it?" "You will never go to the cave now, my love. You will never touch the light inside Liolfa or inside the dead star. You will be a witch of leaves and grasses, at best. You will make love potions and cold cures and gout softeners for those who can pay you, and look up into the sky, tell a young girl whether her husband will have light or dark hair, deliver her baby when the time is right for it, and you will bury her when the time is right for that. But that is all." I swallowed that, chewing on it like a strip of hide. Finally I grunted. A weak witch was better than no witch at all. "Could you do it to another person?" I asked suddenly. Grandmother's eyebrows knitted as if she were trying to work out a strange set of hoofprints. "I don't know. I think I could. I suspect there's a way it could be done, but I wouldn't like to be the one to try it." "Do it now, then," I cried, grabbing at her skinny hands. "Turn into a mouse and crawl out through the lock, or a bird and fly out through the window grate. Bring back a key and set me free. We'll go into the steppe together. Eat deer. Never think about this place again." "Poor little knife. You can be dull and blunt as a rock sometimes," she said kindly. "If I became a mouse, I would scurry out and think of nothing more pressing than getting cheese into my little gray belly. I would forget you, and we would never eat deer together again. Besides, I have a killing to do before I can think on mice or birds, and you have a birthing." And that's where we will leave off tonight. I do, before I take questions, want to say that if you guys have been enjoying this and want a little bit of a change of pace, I'm so excited about this. Lori Penny, who's Penny Red on Twitter, my God, I almost said LiveJournal. The Orphan's Tales is just putting me back into the past, is going to do a reading from Space Opera tomorrow on Instagram Live, over on her Instagram, which is Lori Penny. It's going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern time. I can't do the math quite fast enough to say what that is in other countries of the world, but I know you can. and it's going to be awesome. She likes that book a lot, so I know that she'll give it her all, and it's very exciting to hear somebody who is neither me nor Heath read from space opera. So tune in, and I'll link to it tomorrow as well. So that's happening. It's very exciting. And I saw Copratic ask earlier when I was looking up from the book what order I wrote these in, if each tale was written out and then pieced together, or if it was straight through. I write books from first word to last word straight through. I can't skip around. I know that there are people who do that. That's fine for them. I support their lifestyle choices. I couldn't. It's sounds gross to me. I have ADD. I could, if I skip over a section, I will literally never go back to do it. So everything I write is from the first word to the last word. I move through it as a reader does. As I'm reading the Orphan's Tales aloud, it does seem a little weird to do that with this particular kind of storytelling in the nested tales, but I did. That was the way I wrote them. So it did get written. It's done. So I guess it worked. I was talking last night about how it's so strange that all the stress of writing a book and all the choices and all the days you spend wringing your brain out for it just sort of fade into these two covers. And I no longer remember the specific days I spent trying to work out this plot. And I know that I won't remember in a few years the days that I'm spending right now working out the plot of the book I'm writing right now. It's, I guess, kind of like having a baby. Your brain takes the memory of pain away. A mercy, I suppose. But yeah. So I do write from one stage to another. I'm glad you still write in your live journal. You should still write in your live journal, even though the Russians took it away from us. They did. That's not my being anti-Russian. I think most of you probably know that I have a deep and abiding love for Russian culture, but the political downfall of LiveJournal is one you can read about on the internet. Oh, I'm so glad that you enjoy hearing me read them aloud. It's certainly been an experience for me. Your writing is so poetic. When you're writing or imagining, do you visualize the scene, images, just imagine the words for themselves? If I had any ability to draw, I think I probably would have been a visual artist and never written a word. But I have no ability to draw whatsoever. And so I see these landscapes in my head. I have very detailed visual imagination. And I transcribe what I see, and I obviously care about language a lot. And I put a lot into evoking that, but I definitely see it in my mind's eye. I'm very visually oriented. Anybody else? Again, that awkward moment. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. As this goes on, I'll be doing it every night. And as long as this terrible thing lasts, we all need a little company. We all need a little magic right now. And I think that this is helpful for me as much as it is for you guys to have a place I have to be every night. Even though I am a freelancer and I work at home normally, there's a world of difference between working at home and not being allowed to leave your home. And it hits at very strange times. I know it does for you guys too. So I hope that wherever you are warm and safe and near somebody you care about, even if that nearness is only digital. I hope you are eating all that flour that has disappeared off the shelves. And I hope that you're healthy and that your loved ones are healthy and that it stays that way. You can find me at Patreon, at Kat Valenti, and at Twitter under the same name. You can drop a tip in my tip jar if you want to on the Instagram profile or on my website at katherinemvalenti.com. You don't have to, but every little bit is deeply, deeply appreciated, and anybody who does, I will give a thank you to at the next stream. deeply, deeply means a lot. Anything that comes through that way. And check out SJ Tucker at sjtucker.com. And tune in to Lori Penny on Instagram for a little space opera action tomorrow. I'm so excited to hear her read it. Is my book The Labyrinth still in print? Ooh. No. I say it like that because I do still get a royalty check every year from Wildside Press. And the only book I have that could be construed to have come out from Wildside Press is The Labyrinth. It's like $60 every year, but I do still get it, even though, as far as I know, Wildside Press is not a company anymore. Maybe it's an auto check that they've forgotten to turn off. I'm certainly not going to tell them. I don't think it is in print anymore. It is. You can download it for free on my website. In PDF form. It's also in my collection Myths of Origin, which has 4 of my early novellas in it. So it is readable for certain, but I mean, I only even have 1 copy of that first edition. I think it's pretty rare these days. What am I working on now? I'm working on a book called The Quidnuncs, which is a sort of boy Persephone story involving Finnish folk magic and sort of where the wild things are aesthetic. What's my editing process once I finish a first draft? Well, I edit a lot as I go along, so once I have gotten to the end, as I was saying before, I work straight to the end. It's kind of like a third draft, so I turn it in to an editor who then tells me what's wrong with it and gives me a deadline by which to fix it and make it not terrible, and then I will go through and edit there. I often will have Heath read chapters out loud to me so I can sort of hear what's gone wrong with them, which is a privilege of living with an actor. Highly recommended if you can make it happen. Yeah, my first book, that was what I was saying about The Labyrinth. It's just a giant poem. That's it. I didn't know how to write a book at all. I used to get really mad when people said that, but now I allow the truth to be known. It's just a poem, and I took the margins out so that it would seem like less of a poem. I just had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing with the Orphan's Tales either. The Orphan's Tales is a whole, it's like thousands of short stories put together to make one novel. But the thing is, if you put a bunch of short stories in a row and you call them chapters, then it's a novel, not a short story collection. Pro tip. I've never had any idea what I was doing in the early days. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing now, but I kind of grew up in front of everybody. I wrote this when I was 22. The first book came out when I was 24. No, sorry, The Labyrinth came out when I was 24. This first book came out when I was 26. And so I was just a baby, and you can just line up all of my books in a row and kind of watch me grow up and figure out how to do this. But I don't know that I've ever really figured it out. Keep hoping that like each subsequent book will be better, and that's the best that I can expect of myself. But the Orphan's Tales was definitely a crash course in every kind of skill you need for fiction writing, and I'm just lucky that somebody published it instead of it sitting in my trunk. I'm very grateful to my editor is named Juliet Ullman, and she is, she just doesn't work for Random House anymore. She's a wonderful woman that I absolutely adore. I lucked out that my first editor was someone that I became genuine friends with and I'm still in touch with. And it was a lovely collaboration process, and I learned a lot. But again, I don't think you ever learn enough to say like, it's old hat writing. Every novel is hard in its own way. That was a flurry of questions. I will give you to the end of my taking a sip of this drink before I close this out if anyone has any other ones. Is there a German edition of the Orphan's Tales? I don't know. So as you might have noticed by my saying that I don't have the audio rights, I had a not so great agent at first, so Random House has world rights to the Orphan's Tales, which means that they administer the foreign editions, and I don't always find out that they exist. I just found out there's Greek Orphan's Tales. Neat. didn't know it. And I don't even usually get copies in the mail, so I don't know if there's German Orphan's Tales. I don't think there is, but I could be wrong about that. If I could choose any of my stories to be animated, which would you choose? Fairyland, easily. I would love to see an animated Fairyland. Orphan's Tales was not my first book, technically. My first book was a book called The Labyrinth. My second one was The Book of Dreams. Third one was called The Grass Cutting Sword, and then The Orphan's Tales came out. But those first three are all very short, for one thing, and they're all super weird. For another thing, and they're very much in that poems as short novels school. I'm not unproud of them. It's just that they aren't. It's hard for me to say they're novels. They're neither long and they wouldn't qualify as novels for Hugo consideration. They'd be under novellas, all three of them. So it's hard to say that those were novels, but they were my first three books. So technically Orphan's Tales in the Night Garden was my fourth book, but I would say it's my first novel that is a novel qua novel, to Latin it up. You married the guy who narrated The Boy Who Lost Fairyland. That's splendid. Please tell him he did a wonderful job with Blunderbuss. It's awesome that you think that that's the order it happened in. I guess it is. We didn't get married till long after The Boy Who Lost Fairyland. But yes, my husband narrated The Boy Who Lost Fairyland, as well as Space Opera and Radiance. So you can go listen to those audiobooks. They are very, very excellent. That is my life. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's so lovely to talk to you and have a little bit of social contact, even though we are very appropriately distant and not getting each other sick. It's still really nice to have that sort of human typographical touch. I will see you tomorrow night at 8:30 Eastern Time here on Al Gore's internet, and I look forward to it. I hope you do as well. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. I did all the housekeeping stuff earlier, so we can just sign off. Love you guys. See you tomorrow. Also, Space Opera, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. See you there. Bye-bye.